track racing. Join your hosts Elliot, John, Mike, Matt, and Rick to review this weekend at the track.
Each week, they tackle events trackside, news, and of course, the rumor mill. Stay up to date each week by subscribing to The High Line. Brought to you by the iRacing Warrior Network.
So without further delay, move up to the High Line.
All right, welcome everybody to the High Line, the weekly podcast brought to you by the IWM Broadcast Network. I'm Rick Souza, joined with my co-host tonight. Guys?
I'm Elliot.
I'm John.
All right, and we're here tonight to recap what happened this week in the Tech4Troops Cup Series, as well as NASCAR's All-Star Race, and we'll get through to our clear, not clear segment. So at the top of the agenda for tonight, talking about Season 3 Tech4Troops Cup Series, we were at Richmond International Raceway for our fourth race of the season. We did have 34 competitors, 11 teams competing, and it was a race.
It was a race, all right. I don't want to say disappointing because the drivers did all they could, but for some reason we had trouble last season with Richmond as a group. We had the same issues this year. A lot of attrition, a lot of cautions. We're probably not going to be racing at Richmond anytime soon in the future seasons. But like you said, we had 34 entries, which is still a big group. Did have a lot of attrition, but we also had somewhere around 24 guys or so finish the race. And Zachary Ward finished third. Charles Van Schaik finished second. And, of course, Alonzo King stuck out the attrition and ended up being the winner. And not to breeze right on past Richmond, but why don't we welcome Alonzo to the podcast and just move on to that section?
Okay, we can cover some of that other Richmond stuff briefly. Alonzo, welcome to the High Line, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, guys.
Going into it, what was your strategy for it's Richmond?
I mean, just like any short track, you cannot race the cars around you. You have to race the racetrack. You have to hit your marks. If you miss your marks, like I did on one restart, I got in the door of Charles, backed out of it, let him go by and stuff like that. But you have to race that racetrack. You cannot race any car around you. You're going to overdrive it every time.
Sure, and what I noticed is, last season you won at Richmond. It was your first race here in the Tech4Troops Cup Series. You won again. So I got to ask you, what's the secret sauce to short track racing? Because you just finished up a race at North Wilkesboro just a little bit ago and came back from a lap down and finished up near the front. And also you won at Richmond. So give us, what is your thought process with short tracks?
Just like I was saying, you got to race the racetrack. You have to look at your marks on the wall and hit them every time. Don't worry about the car dive bombing you and stuff like that. You just stay patient. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. And just, what your laps are. Just run that lap. That's the biggest thing.
I find that so common in iRacing because it's that virtual sim racing that emotions just bubble over, and it translates directly to the drivers around you, and whether that's retaliation or just impatient, it just happens.
Well, the biggest thing I've got racing in my background. I know racing etiquette and stuff like that. So it's a big thing to me. It's like, I've just had to learn on iRacing. You cannot expect someone to do what you would do. You have to anticipate what they're going to do a lot of times. And a lot of times, like, I can tell when they're overdriving a little bit, so I'll give them room on the bottom. Go ahead. You're going to burn your stuff up. I'll catch you back in about 15 laps.
No, that makes perfect sense. So you mentioned that you've got racing in your background. Tell us a little bit about you and where you're from. What's in your background from a racing perspective that helps you be successful in iRacing.
Well, my dad was a firm believer. You either start big or you don't start. So at 13 years old, he got me a super late model dirt track car. I ran that all the way up till I was 18. Then I went in the military. did submarines in the Navy. I'm originally from West Virginia. Got stationed in Washington State. The only racing they had up there was figure 8 racing. So, let's go do that. Demolition Derby style. I like that a lot. And then transferred to Virginia. I worked on Frank Denny Jr.'s Hooters Pro Cup team for a season. And I ended up getting injured really bad. And now I just build late model dirt track cars for people around the area here in North Carolina. I moved just south of Virginia. I still work up in Virginia. And I also ran probably about 5,000 laps at Richmond in a regular race car, doing setups and stuff for ride-alongs.
That's incredibly interesting, Alonzo. How old are you?
I'm 42 years old.
You're 42, so you're one of the older fellows we've had on the podcast so far. So you'll answer this question correctly because everybody else has got it wrong so far. The question is, who's your favorite driver, past or present?
You want both?
Sure.
Past is Dale Earnhardt, and present is Kyle Larson.
Well, you got it half right. Okay.
Elliot's not going to be very happy with that answer. Elliot, I think it's, the saying, it may not be, everybody else that has the issue. Maybe it's just you, Mr. Swope. I'm messing with you.
I don't think so, but I like the first answer. Very good answer.
Who's your driver now, Mr. Swope?
Now, I don't have one, but the answers would be Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick.
I applaud him.
Tyler Reddick. Those would probably be the top two. I have more guys that I don't like than I have as favorites.
Any Hendrick driver?
Kyle Larson would probably be my favorite Hendrick driver, but no, none of them. No Denny Hamlin, no Joey Logano, no Brad Keselowski. I mean, I don't want to see those guys ever win a race again. But we can move on from that. You got the answer half right. That's better than most people did. Well, I was going to say, you mentioned your real life racing. How did you get into iRacing? When did that all start?
Well, I was actually playing NASCAR Heat 4 with a group of guys, and I started streaming it on Twitch. And one of the guys that was running with us, he was watching my Twitch channel one night, and he's like, "Have you raced in real life?" Because we always ran the dirt track. And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I raced for years." He's like, "You ever tried iRacing?" I was like, "I've never heard of it." And he's like, "Look it up." So I did, and I saw it, and I was like, "That's a computer-based game. I don't really have a computer or anything." And he's like, "I'll sell you my whole rig with the GTR rig, the computer that was Lamidyne, and 3 monitors and everything for $1,500. I was like, sold. When did I pick it up? He drove it down from New Jersey, and me, him, and a couple other guys just spent a weekend putting it together and started running. And that was probably 3 months before the pandemic started.
Okay, how did you get your team on iRacing? As I know it is Dark Tempest. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That was a bunch of guys I pulled together that run really clean in league races that we've ran together. It actually started with another owner, and his personal life pretty much just got too busy to do it, so he handed the reins over to me. We're real big on clean racing. If I hear any profanity over the radio or anything like that on iRacing, you're automatically off the team. No questions asked. I don't do that. Be respectful, race clean, and right now I have 12 team members, and our average I rating is right at 2,900, which I think
that's pretty amazing.
Good. Now, is the group? Is it? I don't know how to say this. Is it veteran? Is it a veterans group?
There are a lot of veterans in there, yes. But I did pick up some guys that just race clean, that, just all around good people.
That is such a theme with us, both as an organization and as in this series as a Cup series. We have just a significant amount of veteran or active duty families that participate.
And I have one more question, Alonzo. How did you? I don't remember for some reason. How did you end up with IWM? How did you end up racing with us? I don't recall.
Pete Woodrum.
Okay.
Me and him were talking one day because we used to race in the same league a long time ago, and he's from West Virginia, so we kind of bonded over that. And I was looking for a league, and he's like, "Hey, man, I got this one. Come check it out." It's like Tech4Troops. And I was like, "It's veterans?" He's like, "Yep." I said, "I'm there." Came in my first race and won, and I was like, this may be all right. I just like the banter I have with Joey Doucette and all them. They're just good people. Fun racing with them.
All right, we're going to move on to our next segment, which is NASCAR's recap of this past weekend. And we'd love to have you hang out and give your opinion.
I'm here.
All right, on to this week's recap of the All-Star Race and its return to North Wilkesboro, a track that last saw action 27 years ago. And with the concerted effort of Dale Earnhardt and Marcus Smith, they resurrected that track, convinced the NASCAR to get involved, and also the state of North Carolina to invest some COVID dollars in there to kind of bring that track back, and a number of tracks in North Carolina. And here we are. So the first race started out with the Truck Series in the Tyson 250. Corey Heim won the pole, and he won stage 1. And after that, it became the Kyle Larson show. Larson won stage 2 and led 138 of 252 laps.
Well, Larson did at North Wilkesboro. I watched a little bit of that race, and you saw what he learned transition over to the Cup race, which we'll talk about in a second. But he was the only driver to go down on basically the old concrete at a turn 3 and 4, which was giving him a huge amount of grip. And that's I can't speak to the talent of what he has. He can jump at anything and win. And for him to race in that race and, not just win, but just completely dominate, similar to what we saw in the All-Star race, just proves to his talent. I mean, he was the only one that was doing that in the trucks. Then you saw everybody else start to do it, whether it was out of 2 or coming out of 4. So it just proves to how well he can manage the tires, and his racecraft is so, I don't even want to say it. Advanced isn't the right word. It is impeccably accurate to where he knows where he needs to put the car every single lap to optimize not only the lap times, but also his tires to where he can run similar lap times over and over again. It was amazing to watch.
Well, Larson pulled away from the field in an overtime win. Ty Majeski finished second. Matt DiBenedetto finished third. Carson Hocevar, and then Bubba Wallace. There wasn't a couple of, there were 12 cautions for 81 laps, but the most memorable one was a contact with Deegan and Lawless Allen, which, if you saw the interview, Lawless was awesome at repeating all of his sponsors and thanking his team for the race. He answered no questions about the incident with Deegan. I'm sure next week we'll see more of those two.
My biggest thought with that is I have followed Haley for a long time. Followed her dad. I'm even following her little brother now. But she comes from a very racy background. And when I say racy, it's with the side-by-sides, the stadium trucks, stuff like that. And when she first got into the truck series, even she had to change her driving style, from Hooters Pro Cup Tour and all that stuff, because she didn't realize that you're going to get ran over if you're nice out there. And that's the biggest thing. And now she's brought that in. And she's learning that this year. I think she's getting a good handle on it, and a lot of other guys are not liking it. And it's just like every week with the truck, host of our shows it week in, week out. There's no give and take out there. It's just all give.
Well, I think we talked about that a little bit earlier in that the truck series, you've got to be a bully. You have got to manhandle your way to the position that you want, because no one's going to give up an inch. And unless you do it, you're going to be at the back of the pack.
Exactly.
Well, you have to be that way in the truck series, because the races are so short. I mean, I know they're longer than a, feature on a dirt track on a Saturday night, but they're 100 laps, they're 120 laps, and you got to be all go or you get left behind.
Yeah, and it's proven to have really good racing too. It adds a element where the Cup Series, it has that, but with the trucks, like Alonzo mentioned, it is all give. I mean, if you don't take, it's all take rather, no give. If you don't, take, you're gonna get left in the dust. A good example of that was Carson Hocevar when he won his first truck race earlier in the season. I mean, he was in prime position. He did what he needed to do. And yeah, he made some contact that sent, whatever, into the wall. But obviously that was going to happen no matter what happened. But, Carson, he had to put his truck in a position to win. And that's what makes the Truck Series very entertaining to watch, at least in the last stage. First two stages, it's kind of like, I remember what you were talking about, Elliot, a few weeks ago, how it's all about getting to the third stage, stage 1 and stage 2. It's just like, okay, let's turn some laps. Let's make sure we don't do anything dumb so we can get to the third stage. I mean, you can expect that in Cup a little bit too, but in the trucks, you're spot on, Elliot. That's exactly how it's run. It's fun to watch.
Well, what made it hard at North Wilkesboro was the track. You had it's a short track, and there were only 6 lead changes among 5 drivers in the truck race. It was hard to pass. If I recall, we were on wet tires as well, so it just became a more challenging event.
They switched back and forth a couple times on wet. I think they were wet, and then slick. I'm not sure, but I do remember and I do recall that the wet tires were faster, at least initially. Obviously, they're going to wear out more, but that was interesting. I don't know why we have the rule that we don't race in the rain. I know you don't want to race in a downpour on those street courses where you're going 150 miles an hour at some points on the track. But at North Wilkesboro, I mean, I don't know why they had to wait till it stopped raining and all that kind of. They just need to race. Just use it.
Hydroplaning. That's a big issue. That's what everybody's brought up.
I think if they were to put in, if and when they repave that track, there are a number of new compounds in surfaces that they could put down that actually will wick that moisture away and run it right down to the bottom of the track. But I don't know. I just found that the racing was, it was tough to get around. There were there weren't many places to make a pass. All right, on to the Cup Series, and it started with the All-Star Open. So this was a event where you didn't qualify for the pole by racing around and putting up the best time. It was more of a pit crew challenge, and with the pit crew from Denny Hamlin last year, Ty Gibbs wins the pole.
Yeah, I was glad they did that. I was a little. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see the car make a lap like they've done in the past. Because initially I was having trouble when I was watching the pit crew challenge for the pole. I was having trouble figuring out where the time started and when the time stopped. But I'm glad they did it that way. Then they had every car in there. So the one group was qualifying for the All-Star race itself. The other group was qualifying for the Open. And I think it was Suarez qualified on the pole for the All-Star race, if I'm not mistaken. And like you said, Ty ended up on the pole for the Open and won the whole thing. I don't know how they split that money, but they got $100,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I was pretty impressed by Ty Gibbs, and at the end he rattled off the name of every crew member and thanked them individually as part of his team. That was pretty mature of him, so pretty amazing. So with Gibbs in the pole, competition caution was thrown at lap 41, and at that point Gibbs had led every lap up until the competition caution was thrown, and then after that, Josh Berry got off pit road in front of Gibbs, and it was on from there.
Yeah, Josh Berry's a short track guy, and I think it showed up. I'm sure it was a plan with him and his crew, but he was obviously saving for the end of the race. And I think in that second half, I know Josh Berry got around him, but he got around him when Ty and McDowell got together for the second time, if I remember right. So he didn't pass him until then, but once he was out front, they were pretty equal. Ty couldn't really catch him, and Josh
Ty didn't come out. Yeah, Ty did not come off of pit road back in first place. He wound up, and there were a couple of cautions right there within the 10 laps of the restart. After lap 40, he was back there in second and was able to jump out to that second place after each of those cautions. The second caution was lap 50, and that's where you saw Gregson tag the inside wall and Chandler Smith, Todd Gilliard. I think Ryan Newman was collected in that mess as well.
Yeah, Gregson did one of those things we've all done on iRacing. He misjudged where the wall was.
Yeah, and his car was toast.
At least he didn't hit any water barrels, At least there wasn't any water ever on that side.
It's true. There you go. So at that point, with Berry taking over the lead from Gibbs after those caution laps, Gibbs got into a disagreement with McDowell. So he wound up getting up under McDowell in turn 3, which collected, unfortunately, McDowell and Justin Haley.
That's where Josh. Go ahead, Alonzo.
I said that just shows. I'm not really going to try to say he's immature or anything. That just shows his immaturity on the racetrack, especially short track racing. You're going to beat and bang and stuff like that, but that was a little excessive. He had the car to beat, but it was only the car to beat when he was out front. When he got in traffic, he was just like any other Toyota or Ford this year. They've been having problems with the aero push, and him and McDowell was going at it, and he just got impatient and just sent McDowell at the track.
Well, that was where Barry got back around him, obviously.
Yeah,
go ahead,
it was.
Rick. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had no problem. I mean, Ty has, he cut his teeth here in like Hickory Motor Speedway and a lot of the modified series and others. So, I don't particularly have a problem with that. That's really what you always saw at North Wilkesboro. If you needed to get around somebody, you moved them over. I think what unfortunately happened here is because of where Justin Haley was, it ended up collecting McDowell and causing a bigger wreck and pissing off McDowell, which clearly came back a few laps later when, at that point, Berry had taken the lead from Gibbs, and then McDowell made it a point to send a message. And when Gibbs came back around, he ran him down off of turn 1 and then right into the apron, causing some minor damage to the Gibbs car a little bit later in the race.
Yeah, I don't think McDowell and Haley wreck if Haley's not up there above McDowell. I think that was. I think McDowell just gets shoved up the track and probably saves it and probably loses spots to Ty right there. But
yeah,
I don't think those two guys end up in the wall if Justin Haley's not up there above him.
Correct. I completely agree. Now at that point, as they were going around again, McDowell had another chance to seek some revenge, but he was that's kind of how the game is played, right? You get him back, you try. If it doesn't work out, the gentleman says, okay, I tried, good enough, and won't try it again.
I think he tried again. He just missed the second time. I just think he'd slowed down so much that he was a little off target the second time and missed him.
Well, at that point, Berry wins the race. Gibbs comes in second. They both advance to the main event, 2 rookies. And then Noah Gregson gets voted in as a fan favorite. That sends 3 rookies to the All-Star main event, and I don't think that's ever happened before.
I don't think it has, and I was disappointed that they didn't let Gregson and maybe even Ty and Barry, if they wanted, they didn't let him get out a backup car or nothing. So, Gregson had hit the wall really hard, and he wasn't going to win the All-Star race anyway, but he might as well not been out there.
Well, there's a lot of discussion about NASCAR should have stepped in and said, you know what? Yes, Noah wins the fan favorite, but his car is too damaged to continue. Let's look at who was in second place.
Right. Well, what they did do from when I was watching the broadcast, I believe they allowed them to change anything that they wanted to the car under NASCAR supervision, not like any other driver or any other car that was already into the All-Star race. Am I correct on that?
You are.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of agree with the backup car, but I think, I wouldn't. The only car out of those three that I think had a true chance, and it turned out to be on the long run, probably would have been Gibbs, because we saw how Reddick was on the long runs. And I don't know if Gregson would have the car. Barry, probably a good chance, but I would have put Gibbs over Barry on that perspective.
Well, I mean, Gibbs did finish top 10. Gibbs' biggest mistake was not, and it's not only Gibbs, it was mostly everybody who chose not to come in at that first caution. Coming in at that first caution for fresh tires, for those guys, Larson included, changed everything. So I guess we're going to talk about the Cup Series All-Star main event since we're already talking about it now. Let's move on to, Daniel Suarez does win the pole, as Elliot had mentioned earlier, as the pit stop champion for that event. Larson ran away with it, leading the last 96 laps and winning by 4.5 seconds over Bubba Wallace, followed by Tyler Reddick, Chase Briscoe, and Chase Elliott. Larson at the end led 145 of the 200 laps, pocketing the $1 million check. And Larson becomes the first person to win the All-Star event at all three tracks, Charlotte, Texas, and North Wilkesboro.
I'm not going to complain. Well, I am going to complain. But I'm not going to. The crappy race that we saw wasn't because of the racetrack, and it wasn't because of the format. I can see Alonzo on camera making a face because I said crappy there. They don't have the short track set up, the short track package for this car yet. And it was still follow the leader, just like it's follow the leader at Martinsville. And yeah, Larson stunk up the show and ran away, but there wasn't any real passing anywhere else. You mentioned earlier, Rick, that if you didn't pit on that first pit stop, you were basically screwed. And the 6 or 10 guys that did are the guys that finished in the top 6 or the top 10. There just wasn't any on track. There wasn't any real on track passing to be had.
Remember the format, though. For the first 100 laps, you had, I think, 4 sets of tires. You could change tires anytime during that first 100 laps. But after the 100 lap marker, you only had the opportunity to change tires once. That was it. So those guys were saving what they could, at least there. But, I was listening to Ty Gibbs' scanner and communication with his crew chief, and, they admitted, we should have pitted them like those guys did, because they got huge runs and huge advantage because the fall off was so great on these tires with the abrasiveness of the track.
Well, I'm glad they didn't do any of the, funky 20-lap runs, then invert this many, and 30-lap runs, and everybody has to do a pit stop and all that kind of stuff. I'm glad it was just 100 laps and throw a caution and then do 100 more. But until they figure out the right tire or just figure out how to make this car, I don't know what the right word is, more racy on a short track. Every short track we go to, we're just going to watch single file racing.
More horsepower.
Yeah.
Well, that'll work. That's fine. Absolutely.
Well, they're 200 horsepower short on this short track package.
Well, then give it to them.
I honestly say they're about 400 horsepower short, because you need to burn the tires off. That's the problem.
You do, yeah, and it's too equal. It's way too equal. I mean, there was only one groove. I mean, obviously it's North Wilkesboro, but I mean, unless you move somebody out of the way, I mean, I don't know. I agree.
The more horsepower puts the racecraft back in the car. It then puts it on the driver to manage his best time with the least amount of tire wear he can get. And then that puts the driver back in charge. Leaving it this way where you can run around in fourth gear around the track or in fifth gear and you're just driving around like it's Saturday afternoon or Sunday on the freeway. That's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there was some movement. I mean, you saw Reddick moving through the field, which was good to see. You saw Carl Larson do it early, but that was because he had new tires. Other than that, I mean, you saw Briscoe come alive at the end, but other than those couple guys, it was literally like watching paint dry. I mean,
I'll tell you, when listening to Ty's radio, that when Larson came out with fresh rubber and consistently hit coming out of turn 4, all 4 tires on the concrete and gaining just position after position, Ty's spotter was all after him all the way around, making sure he hit his mark and got all 4 tires down every single lap, time in and time again. And it made a difference. The kid drove back. He was all the way back in 24th and came all the way back up to 9th. So,
and we're mentioning horsepower, which you guys are right. You need to, I think it's 750. It probably needs to be 900 or 950. And it's funny that Alonzo said 400 more horsepower. We may need 400 more because the tire is as wide as Texas. And until they're going to give them a thinner tire, I don't know how. You could probably give them 2,000 more horsepower, and it's not going to matter that much.
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to squeeze 400 more horsepower out of that current engine package. I know they've been testing. I think they have found somewhere between 150 and 200, but that may be all they can pull out with the current engine package.
I mean, when you're looking at NASCAR compared to other series, NASCAR is not in a great state when it comes to the horsepower side of the things because they are outside of IndyCar, which ranges between 550 and 750. You have Formula One, which is at 830 on average. So it's like you said, you're just watching around and just can't do anything, and it puts the racecraft back to the drivers to manage it. I think we need to go back to it, but also that means a completely new car with the current engine.
No, you don't need a completely new car. The big thing is you put more horsepower in it, you build the parts to match the horsepower, and you let these guys go out. Because here's what drove me to NASCAR. This is what my draw to NASCAR was. My dad used to sit down on Sunday, and I'd see a car on the track or whatever, and he'd be like, okay, you got 7 square inches of rubber on each tire. Make it last 50 laps at 200 mile an hour. How would you set the car up? Then he'd sit there and be like, all right, here's the temperature. Would you run it loose? Would you run it tight? Here's what the weather's going to do. How would you adjust the car throughout the run? And he would just quiz me on that constantly. And probably about 30% of the time I'd get it right. But that's the big thing is you got so much rubber on the ground. Make it last 50 laps doing them, pulling them G's, pulling that horsepower. Where are you going to throttle up? Where are you going to throttle down? That's a real driver. What they're doing now, you just might as well put them in go-karts.
Yep. I agree.
I don't understand, and maybe you guys can learn me something here. So this big, fat, wide tire that we use now is part of the reason, in my opinion, that the 1.5 miles and those racetracks have been really fun to watch. Lots of passing. Everybody stays kind of close. Nobody runs away with it for the most part. But that very tire, and I think it's more the tire than anything, that tire is what makes the short track racing, or at least half of the reason why it's so crappy, if you will. Why can't we just have a different tire at short tracks?
I mean, it goes back to Indianapolis whenever they were having all them tire issues and stuff like that. How soft do you want them? How much do you want them to burn up and stuff like that? And there's not a lot of testing to these cars. You can take them to North Wilkesboro like they did before anything, but you got to understand the brake, how big the brakes are to compare to what the tires you're trying to do. And if you soften them up too much, then you're going to have brake heat, and it's just going to blow the sidewalls out of them because they have no sidewalls. You can't make them any softer. That's
but
the
I'm glad you
having.
mentioned the brakes. The brake calipers and the and the rotors that are using now are huge. They don't burn up brakes anymore.
Well, this car was designed and based on IMSA, and that's exactly what you will find in an IMSA road car.
These are modified V8 supercars from Australia, is all they are. Like the gearbox and everything else, that's how it's set up.
Well, I like everything except for the half-mile short track racing. I like everything else.
Yeah, but you already said your drivers and stuff that you like, so I can't really trust that.
You see what I mean, Alonzo? It goes all together.
Yeah.
It goes all together. I love you very much, Mr. Swope.
I never knew Alonzo liked vanilla pudding like the rest of you. I just didn't know that.
Hey, vanilla pudding, it's versatile. It can taste good.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's enough. Overall impressions of North Wilkesboro. What was your thoughts that they brought it back?
Love the nostalgia. I love the energy that you saw. I mean, you even saw it on TV how much energy was there. And I love that North Carolina set apart $20 million to put that track back up. You know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that needs to go into the track, but don't lose the nostalgia of it. That's my big thing.
I think they went a long way in preserving the old Winston Cup Series paints that were there on the side of the buildings to try and keep the manual scoreboard still up and still being used for the race. It was great to see. It brought back a lot of childhood memories for me watching NASCAR. It brings back tracks that you don't see anymore, and you wonder what happened to like Nazareth and some other tracks that they used to run all the time.
Sure. And I wasn't, I was not around, obviously, when North Wilkesboro went away, but just seeing all the highlights and being around iRacing, racing on North Wilkesboro, and seeing it come back, knowing the history, knowing what that track means to NASCAR, it gave me chills watching it as a motorsport fan, because you saw even though the race was very dull at times, the fact that they were there and they made that happen, it excites me for the future because of what we're able to do and how the sport is expanding from the kind of tracks we go to. Because like you're saying, Rick, what does this mean for all these other tracks? Like you mentioned Nazareth, some of these other tracks where they could go if they want to revive. So it opens up a brand new horizon to the series.
Just think that, Auto Club is not going to be there for next season.
Right.
So there's dates that could be reassigned. You've got potentially North Wilkesboro, maybe not for a cup race, but that's a track. Rockingham has been completely redone and is looking for some opportunity there. I'd love to see them go back to the Rock. That's a great track.
I'd like for them instead of California. I'd like for them instead of the Coliseum. That they're doing that the duels or whatever they call it now or whatever. I would like for them instead of doing that, find a local track over in California that'll hold 40,000 people. I know there's quite a few. Run it on that. Bring out the weekly series. You know what I'm saying? Just let the boys be boys. That California, I'm not a big fan of that Coliseum race.
It's, in my opinion, it's so Hollywood. It is sterile. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Well, let's talk about that really quick. As somebody who's in the marketing field, that's exactly who they are trying to go after from a marketing perspective. And yes, you can capture that audience. It's the same thing like what they did with the what was it? The Drive to Survive NASCAR spinoff. Was it something to championship? I can't remember what it was. But they're trying to capture this younger audience. And it's cool to see them transform an historic stadium like that into a track. But who are you really trying to reach here? What is your market? What's the mission? Because I'm not a big fan of it either. I mean, it's basically bumper cars. That's all it is. It's just bumper cars around a track that's way too small. So Alonzo made a good point. Put it on a track that we know can fit 40, 50,000 people and you could put on a good show where you don't have to build an entirely new track every single year and pave and spend all that money. Go somewhere else or make it a rotation.
Hey, turn the money you spend to bring the Coliseum to life each year into a revitalization effort into a local short track in Southern California.
100%. 100%.
I mean, the promoter and the owner and say, hey, we got a fix here. Here's what we'd like to do.
Exactly. And, a good driver that would be a big part of that, like Dale Earnhardt Jr. was for North Wilkesboro. Think about Jeff Gordon. He was born in Vallejo, California. You don't think he would jump on that and try to revive some of the tracks that he raced on? I mean, I just think they have a huge opportunity with this. I love that idea.
Only if they serve vanilla pudding. But I think we're going to be at the Coliseum probably one more year, and it'll be gone. I don't know if they did a 3-year deal or a 5-year deal. God, I hope it's not a 5-year deal. But then it'll be gone. And that makes me think, hopefully what you guys are saying will happen. It makes me think of Wilkesboro. And John, you weren't here yet, but Wilkesboro kind of went away because the sport was growing so much from 96 to 06. And somebody at the helm thought, we're going to put 120,000 people, 100,000 people in the stands every week for the next forever. And we got to get rid of these little tracks that only seat 40,000 or 50,000. And so Wilkesboro was one of those tracks that disappeared. But now that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, we all watch the races and, you're lucky to see 50,000 people in the seats watching the race. So hopefully these smaller tracks that we all clamor for anyway, that only seat 50,000 people or so, they can come back around and that kind of be the business model, I hope.
The biggest thing is the business model they used turned their backs on their original fan base. And it showed a lot, getting rid of a lot of the short tracks, going to 1.5 miles, and now you got the road courses and stuff like that. And I hope it's a hard lesson for them to learn that, hey, don't turn your back on what worked for you in the beginning. I mean, you did bring a bunch of corporations in. They do have certain rules and stuff you have to follow, especially the TV time, stuff like that. But quit turning your back on what made you big.
So here's an interesting fact. If you wanted to go see that truck race at North Wilkesboro, there were tickets that were still available. They were $35.
Oh yeah, the truck series tickets and the Xfinity series tickets. You can get them for pennies on a dollar almost everywhere.
It's reasonable to take your kid out to a track or your family or yourself to go out and watch that race or watch that event. You don't have to stay there for the Cup Series. That'd be great if you could, but the money is, the revenue model has changed. It's, where it was, the track and the promoters and the butts in the seats and the dollar they spent on hot dogs and beer. It's now about a percentage of the TV contract. Our next point race is May 28th at Charlotte Motor Speedway for the Coca-Cola 600. That's our Memorial Day race. And in sim racing news, iRacing and NASCAR's Coca-Cola Series ran at Darlington for their throwback night. They ran that on May 16th for the 8-point race of the season. Casey Kirwan was the winner. That win was his 5th of his career. He ties Michael Conti of JR Motorsports and Bobby Zielinski of Joe Gibbs Racing on the series after 8 races. And just, if you want to tune into that, you should check it out. The E-Series fields competitors from Elliott Sadler, RFK Racing, Junior Motorsports, Joe Gibbs in front row. They will return to racing on the same weekend, Memorial Day weekend, for the Charlotte Motor Speedway event. Race starts at 9. You can Google eNASCAR or iRacing, and I'm sure you can tune in.
If you haven't watched any of those races, they usually are fun to watch. I didn't see the Darlington race, but I do watch Casey Kirwan a lot on YouTube. He has a YouTube channel, and he races all the time. And when he's racing in the Coca-Cola Series, he doesn't have any of his I don't know what you want. What do you call that? You can't see his speed, and you can't see his braking, and you can't see all that stuff. Yeah, you can't see his telemetry, if you will. But when he's just racing, which is all the time, when he's just with his friends or with his buddies or by himself, he does have all that stuff up on the screen. So I like to watch him. He's somewhat entertaining. He's obviously fast. I think he a couple of weeks ago he was talking about he's over a 10,000 iRating, and he said he was one of 3 people. He's the only one currently that's over 10,000 that races NASCAR races. He said the other 2 guys were short track guys that do the Legends cars or maybe late models or something like that. But you can learn something by watching him. See where he breaks, see where he doesn't, see how he drives, and he's pretty entertaining too. So there's a plug for Casey, like he needed one.
All right, on to our next segment. It's our weekly Clear or Not Clear, and today we've got just a few topics. And getting back to what we were talking about earlier, Michael McDowell getting back at Gibbs for that incident in the Open. Clear or not clear?
So I don't even know what, like Alonzo said, it's just silly. It's short track racing. McDowell has been around enough to know. I know Gibbs is a kid, but come on. I mean, you're at North Wilkesboro and you can't pass. So what do you got to do? You got to move the guy over and don't take the guy out basically when he's in the lead. And also, I would not even the incident, but that struck that between all 3 of them and Haley. It's hard to say that Gibbs is entirely in the wrong. So I say McDowell getting back at Gibbs is not clear. Elliot?
Okay, I'm going to disagree with what Alonzo said earlier in the podcast about the incident that brought this out of McDowell. It's the All-Star Open. It's not that many laps. It's for $1 million if you make the All-Star race. I know you didn't really ask this question, Rick, but I'm clear on Gibbs getting into McDowell and trying to move him up the track. It's just it's just luck of the draw that Haley was up there in the 3rd lane because he had started on the outside, I guess, on that restart. And I'm clear on McDowell trying to get back at him. That's what we need in racing. It's what we need in NASCAR. We need people that have personalities and show it on the racetrack. Would he have wrecked him if he could have? Probably, but that'd have been okay with me too. It's the All-Star race. That's what it's for. That's what it's about. So I'm clear on everything as far as this goes.
I'm not clear on it. I mean, I don't like retaliation with cars. I never have. Working on them enough. I know what the pit crew guys go through and stuff like that, but don't retaliate on the track. That's always been my biggest thing.
Earnhardt fan. Didn't you say you were an Earnhardt fan?
I am an Earnhardt fan. I didn't say I liked everything he did. So, but, yep.
So for me, it's not clear. I think Gibbs was perfectly fine as he was trying to work his way around McDowell to get by him. Yeah, you're right. Haley was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and McDowell's then interfering with the race, trying to come down on the leader. That's just wrong. If you're gonna. You just don't affect the outcome of an event. It could have been worse. You could have taken the kid out completely out of the race after he had led the first 41 laps and was pretty much headed to winning the race outright. And then to come down and impact him. Luckily, he still stayed in second, didn't get too beat up. But, yeah, I'm not clear.
He took McDowell out, so what the hell's the difference?
It's McDowell.
Okay.
All right. Bubba Wallace comments after the race, making an offhanded comment about Hendrick cheating with louvers and other chewed up stuff, throwing up a middle finger to who knows who, caught on camera. I don't know. Clear or not clear?
So with Bubba, it always seems he's pushing the blame on somebody else. And I don't really know what really happened. It's all he said, she said when the whole middle finger thing. I don't understand how you don't know that you're doing that on camera. I know the Hendrick comment was slightly, tongue-in-cheek, but also it wasn't because of him and Larson's past, specifically at the race where Larson got into Bubba and Bubba took him out, and, Bubba continued to push him, and it's, they don't have very good relationship as it is. So I don't see what that had to do with anything. I really just don't see truthfully, I don't see what good can come out of it. I don't know why you would even say it. Whether it's true or not, I don't know why it even matters to you. So I just say not clear.
I'm clear. I'm clear on the whole thing. The middle finger thing is stupid, I guess. But to me, Bubba, we talked about Ty a lot in the past and how he seemed very immature, at least last season in the Xfinity series with the things that he did and the things that he said. I just think Bubba's immature. He shouldn't be. He's old enough not to be. But I think his emotions that he shows and what he says and what he does just shows that he has a pretty high level of immaturity, and that's what that was. He was trying to be funny with a buddy off camera, and it was kind of stupid, but I don't think it was that big a deal. As far as his comments about Hendrick and the cheating, I'd have probably said the same thing. I thought it was funny. I think I would bring it up every chance I had. I want to remind everybody they were cheating a month ago or whatever. So I'd do the same thing. So I'm clear.
100% not clear on the whole cheating thing, stuff like that. I think he just says stuff to stay relevant. He runs good, but he overdrives the car, spins himself out a lot. He has issues every time he has an issue with a super speedway, it's somebody else's fault, stuff like that. He brings a lot of money to the race team. I think that's why they're keeping him around. With the whole middle finger thing, he was messing around. It is what it is. I don't really care. It is what it is on that one, but not clear.
All right, NASCAR's return to North Wilkesboro was celebrated by some and mocked by a few others. So just simply clear, not clear on the return to North Wilkesboro and possibly getting it back in the track rotation.
Clear with a different short track package, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, clear. We should be racing there all the time, and other short tracks too. So I'm glad they did the race. Wish it was a better race. I'm sure it can be in the future. I was happy they were there, and I'd want to see them there again.
Clear, but if they don't fix this short track package, it is going to kill all momentum to bring short tracks back.
So I'm clear as well. My hope is that the Cars Tour continues to go there. They bring some of the Welland Tour. They have another number of other cars that they could bring and series to North Wilkesboro to keep that track running and busy throughout the course of the season. Yeah,
I mentioned last week that maybe they should, have the trucks there on an off weekend or whatever. I probably don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, but that's just my way of saying they need to stay there.
I agree.
I wish I'd rather it was a cup race, but if they don't, I was disappointed that Marcus Smith said basically we're not saying whether we're coming back or not. I wish he'd have just said yeah we are, but hope they do.
Yep, I do too, and it's I think they just need to go there and test different things and test more horsepower. I think Alonzo's spot on with that. I mean, it's because if it'll translate over, because it's not just North Wilkesboro that we're having this issue. I mean, Richmond, we haven't been to Bristol yet, but we will be going to Bristol here in a few months. So we'll see how that is, and just a part of it.
Yes, we are going to Bristol, aren't we, John?
We are.
I know what's wrong with it. It ain't got no dirt on it.
I love it.
All right. So thank you again for tuning in on whatever podcast platform that you are following. The Highline here with the IWM Racing Network. We appreciate our special guest tonight, Mr. Alonzo King, for joining us this week. And also tonight, if you are looking to watch one of our broadcasts and one of our events for the Tech4Troops Cup Series, we will be at Michigan International Raceway for the Tech4Troops Michigan 240. That kicks off tonight at 8:30 Eastern Time on the IWM Broadcast Network on YouTube at youtube.com/IWM Broadcast Network. You will also find us on our social media channels as well as our Facebook. So we appreciate everyone tuning in for our fifth podcast of the series, and thanks.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Alonzo. It was a pleasure to have you here with us. As Mike, who the hell's Mike? Mike's not even here. As John, who the hell's John? No. As Rick said, we'll be at Michigan tonight, 120 laps. The only guarantee I'll make is that we will not have 24 cautions. So tune in and watch.
I appreciate y'all having me.
Good night, folks.
You got it. All right, folks. Good night, all.